Have a good day. Bye, Daddy.
Daddy.
Bye, Dad.
Bye, sweetie.
Sometimes life forces strangers together in ways no one could ever predict. A single father, a bullet, a child caught in the middle, and a town that would never be the same again. That night, the air was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that makes every small sound echo twice as loud. Under the dim glow of the parking lot lights, a man held his daughter's hand, grocery bag swinging at his side. He was tired, worn from the weight of everyday struggles, but there was a softness in his eyes whenever he looked at the little girl beside him. He thought this was just another ordinary evening. He had no idea that fate was seconds away from shattering that illusion forever. Because sometimes heroes aren't the ones we read about in books or watch in movies. Sometimes they're just ordinary people, single parents trying to make it through the day, who, when faced with a moment of impossible choice, act without hesitation. That night would test the strength of a man who never asked to be a hero, and yet became one. Picture it. A gunshot tearing through the night, a father's instinct colliding with a stranger's fate, and two worlds bound together by blood, but not the kind you're born into. The kind that's spilled on the ground when a man decides to put someone else's life before his own. This is not just a story about survival. It's about sacrifice, loyalty, and what it truly means to be family. But before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And if stories of courage and unexpected brotherhood move you, consider subscribing, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after the final word. Ryan wasn't a man the world noticed. He didn't have wealth, power, or fame. To most people, he was invisible, just another single father quietly pushing through life. But for Sophie, he was everything. He was her protector, her safe place, the one constant in a world that often felt uncertain and unkind. Their little home carried no luxuries, but it was filled with warmth. Ryan tried to make every corner of their lives feel safe, every routine steady. In the mornings, he would wake Sophie with a gentle whisper, his voice soft enough to make her feel as though nothing bad could ever reach her. Breakfast was simple, toast a little too dark, eggs scrambled unevenly, but Sophie giggled at the small mistakes, calling them Daddy's cooking. Ryan smiled at her laughter, though deep down he worried whether he was giving her enough. The truth was, money had always been tight. The bills piled up, his paycheck stretched thin, but Ryan carried the burden in silence. He refused to let Sophie see the worry behind his tired eyes. To her, he wanted to be unbreakable. So he became the man who fixed her toys with duct tape, who turned bedtime into adventures, who made a game out of grocery shopping late at night when the world outside was quieter. But even in those small joys, there was an emptiness that Ryan could never completely escape. Once, long ago, there had been more family, more love. That life was gone now, stolen by fate, and Sophie was all he had left. Sometimes at night, when she was asleep, Ryan sat alone in the silence, staring at the walls as the weight of loneliness pressed down. Yet every glance at Sophie reminded him why he endured it all. She was his reason, his anchor, his future. He carried that devotion in the smallest gestures. When he tucked her into bed, he lingered at the doorway longer than most fathers might, watching her breathe, whispering silent promises to the universe that nothing would ever take her from him. When they walked together through parking lots or crowded streets, her small hand gripped tightly in his. Ryan's senses were sharp, always scanning, always ready. To Sophie, their life was an adventure. To Ryan, it was survival wrapped in love. That's why, on that ordinary evening after their grocery run, when the night felt calm and uneventful, Ryan had no idea the test waiting for him. He didn't know that in just a few moments, instinct would take over, and he would make a choice that would change not just his life, but Sophie's and a stranger's forever. The parking lot was quiet that night, the kind of silence that seemed almost fragile. A faint hum of streetlights buzzed above, casting pale circles of light across cracked pavement. Ryan held Sophie's hand as they walked toward their car, grocery bags rustling softly in the cool evening air. To him, it was just another routine night, one more small errand checked off their long list. But fate has a way of shattering routine in an instant. The sound came first, sharp, violent like thunder splitting the night sky. A gunshot. Ryan froze for the briefest heartbeat, his mind refusing to believe what his ears already knew. Then he saw it. A man in the shadows, arm raised, finger curled around the trigger of a gun, pointed not at him, but at a terrified little girl only a few steps away. In that moment, time slowed. Ryan didn't think. He didn't weigh options. Instinct took over. He shoved Sophie down behind the car, his voice breaking as he shouted her name. Then he lunged forward, crossing the distance in a blur, wrapping his arms around the stranger's child just as the second shot rang out. Pain exploded in his shoulder, white-hot and blinding. The force staggered him, nearly drove him to the ground, but he refused to let go. The girl screamed, her voice piercing the night, and Sophie's sobs echoed from behind the car. Ryan's knees buckled, his body collapsing under the weight of the wound. Yet his arms tightened around the little girl as though sheer will could shield her from the world. The shooter hesitated, cursed under his breath, then fled. Tires screeched as his car vanished into the darkness, leaving chaos in its wake. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer but far too late. Ryan's vision blurred, the world tilting as blood spread across his shirt. He heard Sophie's voice, trembling, desperate, calling for him, her small hands tugging at his arm. He wanted to tell her he was fine, that everything was okay, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he forced out a whisper, "It's all right, baby. We're okay." Through the haze of pain, Ryan caught one final image before consciousness slipped away. A man running toward them, leather vest glinting under the streetlight, patches stitched across his chest and back. His face was twisted with panic, his voice hoarse as he cried out for the girl. The child broke from Ryan's arms and stumbled toward him, and in that instant Ryan understood. The little girl he had taken a bullet for was the daughter of a man from one of the most feared brotherhoods in the country. A Hell's Angel. The sirens arrived, red and blue lights flashing against chrome and leather, but for Ryan the world was already fading. He clung to the last sound he heard, Sophie's voice, fierce and unyielding, calling for her father as paramedics lifted him from the ground. The world returned to Ryan in fragments, muffled voices, the steady beep of a heart monitor, the sterile scent of antiseptic. His eyelids felt like lead, but he forced them open, greeted by the blinding glare of fluorescent lights. For a moment he couldn't remember why he was here. Then pain surged in his shoulder, sharp and unrelenting, and it all came rushing back. The gunshots, the girl, Sophie's screams. He tried to move, but his body resisted. Slowly his vision cleared. Sophie sat curled in a chair beside the bed, her small hand wrapped tightly around his. Her eyes were red, her face pale, but when she saw him stir, relief broke across her features. "Daddy," she whispered. "You're awake." Ryan managed a faint smile, squeezing her hand. "I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere." But even as he said it, he felt a shift in the air. Beyond Sophie, two figures loomed near the corner of the room. Their presence was impossible to miss. Heavy leather vests patched with the blazing insignia of skulls and wings. Ryan's chest tightened. He remembered the parking lot, the little girl, and the man who had run toward her. Now that same man was here, watching him with unblinking eyes. The biker stepped forward, broad-shouldered, weathered, carrying a weight that went beyond years. His eyes softened only when they flicked toward the child now pressed against Sophie's chair. "You saved my daughter," the man said, voice low but thick with emotion. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." Ryan swallowed, unsure how to respond. He wasn't a hero, just a father who reacted. But the weight of those words lingered, pressing down harder than the bandages across his chest. Sophie glanced between them, uncertain. She didn't understand who these men were, only that they seemed both dangerous and strangely protective. The biker leaned closer, placing a hand on the bed rail. "Name's Marcus," he said. "You don't know it yet, but after what you did, you're family now. Family." The word echoed in Ryan's mind. He didn't want ties to motorcycle clubs. But as Marcus's daughter clung to his leg, Ryan realized the bond had already been forged in blood. Outside, the echo of heavy boots thundered down the hall. Ryan turned his head. More leather vests stood like sentinels near the hospital doors. The Hell's Angels hadn't just come to thank him. They had come to guard him, because in their world debts were sacred and Ryan had become one of their own. The news traveled faster than anyone expected. By the next morning, whispers had already swept through the small town like wildfire. At the diner where locals gathered for coffee and gossip, Ryan's name was on every tongue. A single father, an ordinary man, had thrown himself in front of a bullet to save a child. It sounded like the kind of story you'd see on the evening news, not something that happened to one of their own. Hero, some called him, shaking their heads in disbelief. They spoke of his courage with a reverence usually reserved for soldiers and firefighters, but not everyone saw it that way. At another booth, voices dropped low, wary. "You don't cross paths with men like that without consequence," one muttered. "Those bikers, they don't just disappear. They bring trouble." Ryan felt the weight of those whispers everywhere he went. At the grocery store, people smiled too wide, eyes flickering toward his bandaged shoulder. At the gas station, a stranger clapped him on the back and said, "God bless you, man." Yet when he walked home, he caught the edge of hushed conversations, warnings, doubts, fear that violence had now found a place in their quiet town. At home, Sophie clung tighter than usual. She'd seen the leather jackets at the hospital, the looming men with tattoos and hard eyes. Ryan knelt, holding her close, and tried to reassure her. "We help because we can, sweetheart. That's all this is. Just doing the right thing." His voice was steady, but deep inside, uncertainty gnawed at him. Was he telling the truth or just trying to protect her from realities too dark for a child to carry? Across town, in a dimly lit bar that served as the Hells Angels gathering ground, the atmosphere was heavier. Marcus stood among his brothers, his voice gravelly, his grief still raw. Lily, his little girl, had nearly been taken from him, and a stranger had stepped into the line of fire to bring her back. Loyalty was everything in their world, and Marcus knew the debt carved into his heart could never be ignored. "He saved my blood," Marcus said, slamming his fist against the bar. "And no man walks alone after that. Not while I breathe." Around him, heads nodded in grim agreement. They were men built on code and brotherhood, and Ryan, whether he wanted it or not, had been written into their circle. The town worried about what the bikers' presence might bring. But for Marcus and his brothers, there was no question. Loyalty demanded action, and for Ryan and Sophie, life was about to change in ways they never imagined. Ryan's discharge papers felt like a ticket back to normal life, or at least what passed for normal in his world. His arm rested stiff in a sling. His body ached with every movement, but he was ready to tuck Sophie back into her own bed, read her stories without the sterile hum of hospital machines. He wanted ordinary, the kind of quiet that made the chaos of the last days fade like a bad dream. But peace was not waiting for him. The first sound came as a low, rolling growl in the distance. Ryan paused, frowning, unsure if it was thunder. Then the growl swelled, multiplied and deepened until the ground itself seemed to vibrate. Sophie, who had been setting her stuffed bear on the windowsill, froze. Her wide eyes turned toward him. "Daddy, what is that?" Ryan moved to the door just as the unmistakable roar of motorcycles filled the street. Chrome glinted beneath the afternoon sun, engines snarling like wild beasts, commanding the attention of every soul within earshot. Neighbors peeked through curtains, pulling children away from windows. The row of Harley-Davidsons lined the curb with military precision, each rider clad in black leather and patches heavy with history. At the center of them all was Cole, his massive frame dismounting with a weight that bent the silence of the street. Beside him was Lily, clutching his hand, her tiny steps hesitant but determined. Sophie tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, it's them." Her voice trembled between fear and awe. Ryan stepped onto the porch, his heart hammering. His sling made him feel exposed, vulnerable, as though every eye was measuring him. Cole's gaze met his, steady and unflinching. Then with a nod, Cole motioned Lily forward. The little girl carried something in her hands, a piece of paper folded and smudged with crayon. She looked up at Ryan, her small voice trembling but clear. "I made this. For you." Ryan took the picture carefully. On it, she had drawn a man with a cape, standing tall in front of a shadowy figure with a gun. Behind him, two little girls, Lily and Sophie, held hands, smiling. Above them, she'd written in crooked letters, "Thank you, hero." Ryan's throat tightened. The pain in his shoulder dulled beneath the ache in his chest. He lowered himself to one knee, ignoring the pull of stitches, and met Lily's eyes. "Anytime, kiddo, anytime." Behind them, Cole spoke, his voice carrying the weight of iron. "You saved my little girl. In our world, debts are never forgotten. From this day forward, you're under our protection." His brothers nodded, silent but powerful in their unity. Ryan's neighbors stared, caught between fear and disbelief. For them, the sight of Hell's Angels lined on a suburban street was nothing short of a nightmare. But for Ryan, watching Lily slip back to her father's side and Sophie clutch tighter to his hand, the moment carried something more complex, a mixture of dread and unexpected safety. Because sometimes, protection comes wrapped in leather and thunder, and sometimes family finds you in the strangest of ways. That night, the quiet of Ryan's house felt thin, fragile, like a sheet of glass stretched too tight. Sophie had finally drifted off to sleep, her small hand tangled in the fur of her stuffed bear. But Ryan lay awake in the living room, the weight of everything pressing on him harder than the pain in his shoulder. He wanted to believe it was over, that the shot in the parking lot had been a random act of violence, an accident, something that could be filed away as bad luck. But the truth wouldn't let him rest. Cole showed up after midnight. The familiar growl of his bike cut through the silence, then stilled. Ryan opened the door before the knock came. Cole stood there, smoke curling from a cigarette, his face carved with exhaustion but sharp with purpose. He didn't waste time with greetings. "You need to know something," Cole said, his voice low, gravel laced with steel. "That shooter wasn't random. He was aiming for us. My brothers and I. We've got enemies. And now, because you stepped in, you're on that radar too." The words landed heavier than the bullet had. Ryan swallowed hard, his thoughts flashing upstairs to Sophie's sleeping face. Fear twisted inside him, cold and relentless. "You're saying he might come for me? For her?" Cole didn't flinch. "I'm saying he will. And when he does, he won't care that you didn't ask for this." He dropped the cigarette, crushing it under his boot. His eyes, fierce and unwavering, softened just slightly when he added, "But I won't let it happen. Not on my watch." Ryan shook his head, frustration and fear colliding. "I never wanted this. I just wanted to keep Sophie safe." "By saving your daughter? Did I put mine in more danger?" The silence stretched. Cole's jaw worked, the roughness of a man who had seen too much and carried even more. "Listen," he finally said, voice steady. "What you did, that wasn't just brave. That was blood. And in our world, blood binds. You're family now."
And we ride with family.
The word family hit Ryan with a force he hadn't expected. He hadn't heard it spoken with conviction in years. Yet even as the warmth of it stirred something in him, the fear for Sophie's safety remained, sharp as broken glass. He looked out at the shadows beyond his porch, half expecting to see eyes watching, waiting. Somewhere in the night, a lone engine roared and then faded, carrying with it a promise Ryan could neither trust nor ignore. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint chill of autumn. Ryan adjusted the strap of his sling as he walked Sophie toward her school, each step echoing with unease. He wanted this morning to feel normal. Backpacks, chatter of kids, the promise of ordinary life. But his gut told him nothing about today would be ordinary. As they rounded the corner, Sophie's small hand tightened around his. Her steps faltered. Ryan followed her gaze and his heart stuttered. Lined up along the front gates of the school were motorcycles. Chrome gleamed under the rising sun, handlebars glinting like weapons. Engines idled low, growling like beasts chained but restless. And beside each bike stood a man clad in leather and steel, patches stitched with history, loyalty, and fear. The Hell's Angels, a wall of thunder and shadows guarding a place meant for innocence. The schoolyard froze. Parents clutched their children tighter. Teachers whispered urgently among themselves, and kids pointed with wide-eyed wonder. The contrast was almost surreal. Bright backpacks and playground laughter colliding with the dark, intimidating presence of men who lived by a different code. Ryan stopped in his tracks, caught between dread and disbelief. Sophie pressed against his side, her voice trembling. "Daddy, why are they here?" Before Ryan could answer, Cole stepped forward. His boots hit the pavement like hammers, his presence impossible to ignore. Lily walked beside him, her tiny frame dwarfed by the towering figure of her father. She spotted Sophie and waved timidly, as though their shared terror in the parking lot had bound them together in ways neither fully understood. Cole raised his voice, gravel steady and commanding. "The man who came for us. He's still out there. But not today, not here. This place, these kids, they're under our watch." Whispers spread like wildfire. Parents pulled out their phones, some dialing, others filming. Bikers at the school, one muttered. God help us. Another shook her head, voice sharp with fear. This is protection? Or intimidation? Ryan's stomach knotted. He wanted to shield Sophie from the sight, from the stares, from the weight of an entire town's judgment. But then he looked down at her. Her fear so sharp a moment ago was softening. She watched Cole and the others with cautious curiosity, as though realizing these men weren't there to hurt her. They were there because her father's choice had tied them together. Ryan exhaled slowly. The roar of engines no longer sounded like thunder to him. It sounded like a promise. And yet beneath that promise lingered the sharp edge of danger. What if the shooter returned, right here, right now? The thought tightened his chest. But when Cole's eyes met his, unwavering and fierce, Ryan felt a flicker of something he hadn't in a long time. Safety. The school bell rang. The bikers didn't move, and for the first time since the night of the shooting, Ryan dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could hold the line. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson as Ryan sat on his porch. Sophie played quietly nearby, drawing shapes on the wooden planks with chalk, her laughter soft but fragile. For the first time in days, the weight on his chest seemed lighter, though the scars, both visible and hidden, were far from healed. He leaned back, cradling his injured arm, and let the quiet sink in. Everything had changed since that night in the parking lot. He hadn't asked for it. The bullet, the bikers, the whispers from neighbors who didn't understand. All he had ever wanted was to keep Sophie safe, to give her the kind of ordinary childhood that had slipped so far from his own grasp. But life had different plans. Cole appeared again, walking up the porch steps with a gravity that silenced the evening air. No roar of engines this time, no thunder of boots, just a man stripped down to his truth. He stopped a few feet away, his leather vest catching the fading light. You gave me my world back, Cole said, his voice rough, carrying the kind of weight words rarely held. My little girl, she's breathing because of you, and I'll never let you stand alone again. Ryan studied him, torn between gratitude and unease. He wasn't used to leaning on anyone. But in Cole's eyes, he saw a sincerity that couldn't be faked. It wasn't about reputation or image. It was about a father who understood the cost of love, of sacrifice. Sophie looked up, her wide eyes filled with the innocent questions that haunted her heart. Daddy, she whispered, are we safe now? Ryan glanced at the street where a few motorcycles still lingered like silent sentinels. He looked back at his daughter, brushing a lock of hair from her face. His voice was steady, though emotion tugged at every word. Yeah, baby, he said softly. We are. Sophie smiled, laying her small head against his side. And for the first time since the bullet tore through his shoulder, Ryan allowed himself to believe it. Sometimes family isn't the one you're born with. Sometimes it's forged in fire, in sacrifice, in the kind of loyalty that can't be broken. In the days that followed, the town continued to whisper. Some called Ryan a hero, a man who had stepped into fire without hesitation. Others shook their heads, warning that nothing good ever came from standing too close to the angels. But for Ryan, none of that mattered. He wasn't chasing glory and he wasn't afraid of rumors. All he cared about was the steady rhythm of Sophie's heartbeat as she slept, safe under his roof. The truth was simple, though not easy. Family wasn't always about blood. It wasn't about last names or shared history. Sometimes family found you in the unlikeliest places, in the roar of motorcycles outside your door, in the scar on your shoulder that told a story of sacrifice, in the hand of a stranger's child clutching yours like it was the only safe place in the world. Ryan never asked to be part of their world. He never sought the weight of their loyalty. But when he saw Cole standing in the shadows at the edge of the street, arms folded, eyes scanning for threats that might come, he knew the bond was real. A brotherhood had been forged in a single moment of instinct, written not in ink but in blood. And as for Sophie, she would grow up remembering this not as the time her father was hurt, but as the time he proved what it meant to protect, what it meant to love without hesitation. So if there's anything this story leaves behind, it's a truth worth carrying. Courage doesn't wait for permission. Loyalty doesn't need explanation. And family, the kind that truly matters, sometimes arrives on roaring engines when the world least expects it. If this story moved you, take a moment to subscribe. It helps us share more stories of courage, sacrifice, and the kind of family that defies definition. Because sometimes the people who save us are the ones we never saw coming.